things about John. He's a Karen national from Burma who came to Australia in the 1960s, initially to study and then seeking asylum. And he's been a lecturer in education at UTS and a head teacher in IT at TAFE. Although he's now retired, he works mainly in refugee matters and serves on the board as a member of the board of the Refugee Council of Australia, where he represents Karen Australia-wide. Tasneem, his daughter, is an actress and is the secretary of the Friends of TCI Australia, which is a non-profit organisation that supports the Thumbia Christian Institute, which is a higher learning institute in a remote area of the Karen state in Myanmar. She's had a keen interest in the refugee situation in Myanmar and women's rights. And John is going to first talk to us, then Tasneem, and then after that, it's Q&A for us. And Gary is going to be the person who is going to choose people to ask questions after you put your hand up. So welcome both of you. And John, would you like to start off?
Thank you very much, Donald. And I want to say a good evening to everybody. Thank you for having us as speakers. And it's a two-way street, you know. Sure you want to know about Burma, but we also want you to know about, you know, our issues and our predicaments and this crisis that we're going. So it is a two-way benefit. So thank you very much for having me here. I'd like to thank especially Eileen, who initiated this, and of course to Vicky and Ruth for liaising, for linking, for synchronizing different aspects of the talk. So thank you, Ruth and Vicky and Eileen as well. Yeah, I'd like to. I'm speaking from the land of the Kuringa people, so I like to acknowledge the custodian, traditional custodians, the Kuringa people, and to pay my respect to the elders, past, present, and emerging. Yeah, I just now share my screen with you, if I may. Gary, you've disabled my screen sharing. Very good. Thank you. Can you all see my screen?
Yes. No.
Nope. No. No.
Give it a second.
Well, we just see your face.
I can't see your screen either, John.
Can't see my screen?
No.
But I can't share my screen, that's why.
You can. Just,
I think that you have to be made a co-host.
It might not be Zoom.
You see my screen now?
There you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here we are. All good.
All right. My topic is Myanmar coup, and actually the subtext is a Korean's perspective. It's sort of one Korean's perspective, really. I'm a Korean, and this is the way I see it. It's a very personal view, of course, and it all depends. It all arises from the crisis that we are going through, and is very serious and very still continuing. But
TCI Australia.
probably
It's TCI.
It is cutting in and out a little bit.
my internet is playing up at the moment. Can you all hear me clearly now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so you know, with the crisis that is happening, and it is going to get worse before it gets better. On the way that gives you hope or thought in terms of a better future for Burma. And this is what I'm sort of looking at, my reflection on what's happening at the moment. But let me just, before I start, let me just talk a bit about myself. You already about, let me just summarize a couple of points here. I'm a Korean national, of course. I came to Colombo Plan, came to Australia in 1960 as a Colombo Plan student. And 62, we had the first military coup by General Ne Win, and he took power from the then democratic government, and that led to 50 years of military rule until in 2015 government. That's a lot of years for military rule. In 1962, though, I was studying in Sydney University, and because of the coup, I took a very active role in student activism. And that makes it very dangerous for me to return to Burma when my visa expired. So I sought asylum in Australia, but I had a lot of difficulties because at the time, Australia had this white Australia policy. I went through a lot of uncertain times, of course, for over about 5 years. But finally, I was granted permanent residency. And then later on, I became a citizen. But on the 1st of February this year, it has happened again. There's a second coup this Myanmar. And we were expecting, a lot of good things because Aung San Suu Kyi on 8th of November 2020 had another landslide. So we were thinking of a lot of big and better things, but we were shocked. We were surprised when we heard that the army took over the very day that the new parliament was to start. And when you look at the reason it's fraudulent election, I wonder where they got that idea from. Anyway, the fallout from the coup has been devastating and continuing. Yet the opposition to the coup has been widespread and sustaining as well. And the grassroots widespread protests along the way, it's been about 4 months, 5 months now, unite people. People start to know each other, start to understand each other's issues, and gain perspective of other people looking at it. I'm talking about the main area and all regional areas, the ethnic areas. They start to see each other perspectives, and they actually come to a convergence, and that's very interesting for me to see. That's where I thought there might be some hope in terms of getting a better future for Burma. And also, at the same time, there's a parallel government. It's called National Unity Government. And this government democratic government, which just won the election. And then the members include ethnic leaders from ethnic parties as well. And the policies are very integrative, very inclusive, and especially in relation. They start me to wonder and see if there's a new future for Burma. And that is actually what I like to talk to you about. It's one Karen's perspective. But let me first tell you who the Karens are, and then I'll go on to my my personal view on the coup. Well, the Karens we are an offshoot of the Mongolian race, actually. And we settled in Gobi Desert in Mongolia on the 14th century BC. And because of migratory pressures, we moved down to Western China, where we settled in at the source of the Yangtze River. The Chinese historians call us the Yang people. We get the name from the river itself. And of course, Cayenne is anglicized into Karen by the British. Then from the south of Yangtze, we came down the Yangtze River because we got more pressure from other migrations. Then when we get to the top of what we call now Burma, we came down three big rivers, Irrawaddy, right through the middle of Burma, Salween, eastern of Burma. And so today, you find Karens in the Delta region of Irrawaddy and along the mountainous region along the Salween banks, and of course, northern Thailand at the where Mekong is. So today, we're more than Karens, of course, because other ethnic groups followed as well after us. The Kachins, Kayas, the Cayennes, the Karens are here. And we have other groups coming in. And we, the historians, tell us that we are the first arrival. So we are the first nation really in and I just want to draw your attention because the long conflict that people hear about Burma is between the Burmans, the most fierce is between the first arrival and the later arrivals. And today, this is where we are situated. The Kachins are up here in the north. Here's the Shan in Shan State. And the cities where the Karens are. And then the Moon goes here, go there, and the Rakhine go there, and the Chin go there. So we are in a horseshoe shape in Burma. And that's a very mountainous region. Whereas the Burmas, the latest arrivals, they live. You can see them in the central part, but they are Karens at the border of Irrawaddy here, and also here as well. We are down because we came down three rivers. The story, because apart from those major ethnic groups, there are discrete smaller groups, small ethnic groups, and it's worthwhile looking at them because they are also in the conflict. They each own interest in terms of self-determination. So you have the Palauns, their cultures are quite distinct, quite different, and they don't have their own states, but they do. They are situated in different states. So I just want to show you on the. You can see the Rohingya are here at the little top of the Rakhine state. And then the Lisu are here at the bottom of Kachin state and then and the Shan state and Palaun and so on. So they are quite significant. They make a lot of noise and they might be small, but the Wa, for instance, people, they're the most well equipped in terms of equipment. They have the most fiercest, the most modern weapons. So we can't ignore them. They're small groups, but they're very powerful. So having described all those ethnic groups, you can see now the distribution, the composition of the population is in Myanmar. Myanmar population 54 million. It's a lot of people, but the majority are the Burmas or the Burmans, of course, 68%. Then followed by the Shan, by the Cayenne or Karens, 7%. We're about 5 million, so maybe we've been more than 5 millions. And comparison figures here. Area is less than New South Wales. But if you look, it has 74 million, whereas New South Wales is only 8.166 million. Matter of fact, the whole of Australia has only 25 million. So Australia is definitely not very crowded. culture. We cultivation on the land. We plant rice. And this looks a bit like my village actually. And you know, you look out and you see the paddy fields green with the rice and things like that. And you're happy when you hear frogs croaking because you know that the rice is the waters are plenty and the rice is growing well. Firstly, animists, you know, where we believe that everything has spirits, the trees, you know, the fields, the houses. When we, you know, go to a house, we take our shoes off because in respect to the spirit of the house. Buddhism came to the Korans in the 17th century. So in a lot of these villages, you'll see little Buddhist shrines and pagodas. Christianity came to us on the 19th century, and it's like this. Villages you might have, and these young girls has offerings, fruit, whatever, they take it to the monastery or to the shrines. But there's also a mosque, a picture of a mosque here, because we have Muslims living with us. They came in with the British. They're from India or Bangladesh, and they're the Rohingya actually. But they settle there. They speak Quran. They live like Qurans, but they worship Islam, of course. In terms of population, in terms of proportion, the Buddhist enemies, they are 70%. A lot of the Buddhists also are enemies. So they're enemies first. When the Buddhism comes, they are still enemies. So they combine. The Buddhism is very tolerant. So there's no problem in terms of having those two religions together. And Christians, Baptist, Catholic, Adventist, about 20 to 30%. That's among Korans. But in Burma, all across Burma or overall, the Buddhist 85%. It's a very Buddhist country. Christian 8%, Islam, Muslim 4%, enemies 3%. We have festivals and events, of course, and New Year. This is a secular one. And we have Korean New Year at the end of harvest. So it's a big occasion. And you have music, you have dances, this is called a bamboo dance. I might see if I can, sorry for you. I'll get more time.
Okay. It's not showing the video.
Hmm?
It's not showing the video. You have to share the video.
Sorry. Sorry, folks. It's not
you have to stop sharing your screen. You'll have to stop sharing your PowerPoint screen to share the video and then go back if you want to.
Okay. No, I'm sorry. I'll just move on. I thought there's a little clip I'm going to show you. There's a bamboo dance, and that's part and parcel of the celebration on Korean New Year. Let's go on to the next one. Of course, we have religious-based celebration as well. This is a Buddhist New Year. Water festival, I mean, they throw water on each other. And also the Buddhist full moon day, they go to this temple and they make offerings. They even bathe the Buddha like this one. You have music, you have musical instruments. So these are some of the traditional instruments they use to accompany the festivals. There's a custom here. It started as an animist tradition, but it's secular now. All Koreans have wrist trian ceremonies annually, actually. The wrist trian is sort of a symbolic thing where you try to combine the spirit with the body, and they believe that as you travel through the year, through stress and strains, your spirit tend to leave you. So it's a matter of bringing the spirit together. And it's also a sign that sign of communities coming together as unison. In every village, most household would have a loom, and they would weave all these beautiful costumes. Education is foremost very much valued by the Karens. Originally, before the missionaries comes, education, village education is very much given by the monks in the Buddhist monasteries. But when the missionary comes, you have mission education. The Karens are very keen on education. They put a lot of value on education, even if they're running away from fighting. As long as there's a fight, a relief from fight, they would start a class. Some of the images here. This is a nursery education in the camp, in Mela U camp, in the Taiwan, learning a vocational skill. Yeah, it's a group of IDPs, internally displaced people class, and there's no school, but they just sit there and they took their lessons. Here's a school in a bunker because they are being airstriked in the Karen village. So, but they get into the bunker, and the school is on. Here, a group of young people, young Karens, attending a university class within Karen State, the university called TCI. Tasneem will talk to you about it later on. Here's a school in the Mela camp. The school is pretty breezy, you know. There's not, it's nothing special. But if you go into these schools, I went to one of these schools when I visited the camps, and on the board they're teaching calculus. It's really you know, amusing, but it's really inspiring as well. And this is Thumbia Christian Institute, a little graduation class, and Tasneem will talk about that as well. Now, folks, we can't talk about Karens without talking about displacement or refugees, because a lot of us are outside the country, and we're either in a refugee camp waiting to be transferred to a third country, or waiting to go back, or we are in a third country like Australia and we are former refugees. So we need to talk about it, because a lot of us become refugees through conflict, through discrimination, and through persecutions, which goes back a long time. And over the years, there have been at least 200 million refugees coming into the Thai-Burma border. This is Burma, this is the Thai-Burma border. Here, all these are refugee camps along all along. There's seven camps, or more than 7 camps, I think. But the people in the camp, some of them been there 30 more years. Some of them born there, and the lucky ones get sent to the third country like USA, Canada, Australia, and so. And still, there are still 90,000 left today in the border regions in Thailand. So we're trying to get, because the third country settlement has stopped for them, unless just for family reunion. Other types of settlement are no longer available for them. So quite a lot of Karens come to Australia, and I just extrapolated from a report, and there'll be about 15,000 Karens in all the states in Australia. And Karens do very well in Australia. The humanitarian program that's provided for them really suits them very well. They more or less really thrive. And of course, education continues to be emphasized. And we have few, but now we are starting to get teachers, lawyers, doctors, and plumbers, electricians, We want more, of course, but it is starting to happen. We also have a lot of Koreans working in the meat industry, transport, cleaning, and service industry, and things like that. And the happy thing to say is there's hardly any unemployment among Koreans. Koreans are really willing to work and willing to improve themselves. Here are some pictures of graduates in different certificates in TAFE, and this one is aged care support, and this young girl has an industry certification in interpreting skills. And here the daughter is graduating in Bachelor of Education Primary. A couple of year 12 students from different high schools around Sydney. They also do well in country areas in regional Australia, and there have been some reports about the Korean in Bendigos, and these reports noted that because of the Koreans there, the area reaped 60.1 million in that particular decade. They report that the Koreans have strong work ethic and commitment to the area. Because of their presence there, they pulled in 11.7 million in Bendigo's GRP, gross regional product. And they have fostered tolerance, and they said this is at odds with anti-immigration rhetoric that says that, you know, the refugees will take our jobs and they can't settle, which is not true in this case. And they said that after all, Australia is a tapestry formed from immigration. So, folks, that's a good of my talk. Donna, shall I go on to the second part? I can't. You're muted, Donna.
I wondered whether, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
I wonder whether Tasmin would like to say a few things about her experiences both here, and I don't know if you have been back to Burma yourself, or you've spent all your life here in Australia.
Sure. Well, I was born here. So obviously Dad is Korean, and my mother, Margaret, who's also here, she's from Scotland. So I grew up here. I spent a little bit of time with my family in England, and we've been back as a family twice. Mum and Dad have been back more often than I have. When I went back the first time, it was actually a military dictatorship. And it was very clear. There was a lot of like signs and banners. There was a lot of military presence there. At that particular time, all of the universities were closed because the students historically had protested in the past. So we were banned from entering any of those zones. One of my parents' friends actually used to teach at the university, and their kids actually snuck us in the back of a Jeep illegally into their university just to show us around, which was super illegal, and Mum and Dad had no idea that that was happening. But yeah, the first time I went, there was a huge military presence, and the last time I went back was 5 years ago. So that was when it was somewhat of a democracy, and it was certainly different. And I definitely had the chance to visit some areas that we wouldn't have been able to visit before under the dictatorship. But thank you for asking, Donald. Is there anything more specific that you'd like to know, or?
What work do you do in respect of the Karen here in Australia or in New South Wales? Do you have any specific activities that you do with them or for them?
Well, I think Dad actually, my contribution is commensurate to my skills. So I'm an actress. So a lot of the things that I do are on public speaking, that kind of thing, and celebration days. And I've done some work in preparation for some grants as well. But Dad has a lot to do with the Australian Karen organisation. So Dad, did you want to speak more about that and your fact-finding missions in Myanmar? You're on mute, by the way.
Donald and everybody, I have been working with Karen community for the last 20 years, I guess. Community work, helping somebody who just came out, taking them half a dozen mangoes and welcoming them, making them comfortable. But I'm also on the Australian Karen organization, on the membership. So I am actually education representatives. So I look after the educational aspect of the Karen young people, young Karens here, and I also represent the Karen nationally on the Refugee Council, the Border Refugee Council. So that keeps me pretty busy because they have the number of Karens around Australia. They are very active. They keep in touch with you. They tell you their issues, and if they want something, they tell you to take it up and so on. And I'm also I also belong to the Asia Pacific Refugee Rights Network. That's Asia Pacific area, including Burma, of course. And I'm a deputy chair of a working group called Durable Solutions. So I go to Malaysia, I go to India, I go to the border regions because that's where the Karen refugees are. And I'm actually responsible not only for the Karen refugees, the refugees of other ethnic groups as well, Myanmar refugees. And there are about 15,000 Myanmar refugees in Malaysia, 2,000 in India. And of course, in the border region, there's about 92,000 there. So before the coup, I was in the process of on a program to take them back to Karen state to settle them there, and if they don't have any home, we sort of get in touch with the local authorities, and we try to find them accommodation and find them work and so on. So in other words, sort of a voluntary return thing. But when the coup comes, even before the coup, there was problems with the Burma army, who tried to break ceasefire agreements, trying to build a road through a road through the Karen areas, and so they are fighting. So we have to stop that. We can't go there. It's too dangerous, and of course COVID-19 sort of occurred as well. So we actually, it's in abeyance for a long time, as long since the start of last year. Yeah, you're muted there, Donald.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, good. Look, could you say a bit about the long-standing military struggle between the Karen army and the Burmese army?
Yes, I'd love to. That actually is in my second part of the talk, so I might go there, and then I'll be touching on that. Okay. Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because the war has been going on so long, for the last 70 plus years, and we become the forgotten people of Asia. So, but I'm glad you asked that question, and I'm just going to go back to my talk there. So can you all see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So this is my talk, and as I said, it's just a personal view on what's happening in Burma at the moment as a result of the coup. And what I see is, through the crisis, through the fallout, there are signs of coming together in terms of the future for the country. But to understand what is happening in Australia, not in Burma, and why the struggle is so long, you need to really go back to 1947, when when Britain had agreed to give Burma independence, and General Aung San was given the job of forming an interim government, and to do that, he has to go around the country and try to get the people together who want to be in the new Burma. So the document that I'm referring to is called the Panlong Agreement. This was signed in a place in Shan State, a little place called Panlong. Okay, and the agreement was aimed at setting up a federal union, a federation union, and on the foundation of equality, autonomy for every ethnic nationality in Burma. So it was pretty visionary stuff. A federal union to start with, and then acknowledging equality, autonomy for every ethnic nationality. There are 8 groups there. They all should have equal, should get autonomy as an ethnic national. And he also went on to draft a constitution. And the constitution says the union, this federation, will be composed of 8 national states, corresponding to 8 ethnic groups in Burma. And he said each national state will have a separate constitution. Not only that, constitution and their own organs of state, parliament, government, judiciary. In other words, each state has autonomy in a federation, of course, but it has a parliament, it can make laws. So it's a very modern concept, actually. That's 1947, and General Aung San was only 30 years old, and it's a very great vision. It's a very inspiring sort of concept. However, he was assassinated on the 19th of July, 1947. And what happened next was the cause of the armed conflict we've had since 1949, because the new constitution, the government that took over from Aung San, changed the constitution completely. So the 1948 constitution is the constitution that the independent Burma adopted when it started, because it reversed all the principles that Aung San put into the first constitution. And here in the constitution, all ethnic nationalities apart, except ethnic Burmans, formed their respective national states. So they formed the national states first, but the Burmans did not. Instead, the Burmans combined the power of their Burman national state with the whole sovereign authority of the Union of Burma. In other words, the sovereignty was given to only the Burmans, which means that we end up in the country, in the constitution, that the Burman control the sovereignty because they own the sovereignty. The ethnic states don't own the sovereignty. They become like vassal states. And this is the whole crux of the problem that we've had the last 70 plus years, because the ethnics know that this is not the right, this is the Panlong Agreement. This is not equal. In the federation, all states, all members should be equal. So what happened is today, we have the states in our names. I show you the horseshoe, the state of Karen Kachin state, and there is no Burma state. There's no Burmese state, because Burmese state is not a state, it's a country. Why? Because it's been given the sovereignty of the whole country. That's why, you know, that the name, they changed the name to Myanmar Pi. Myanmar Pi means the land of the Burmans. That's why a lot of the ethnic groups don't want to use the name, because they don't agree with the structure of the country. But that is actually the problem that we've encountered today, still not solved. In other words, the Panlong Agreement was never honored. That's why the armed conflict occurs. And the armed conflict between the Burma army and other ethnic groups, there are 22 ethnic armed organizations. They all want self-determination, autonomy, but they don't want to secede. They just want to be in a federation specified by the Panlong Agreement and confirming Aung San's 1947 Constitution. So we've done, all of us have done that since 1940. The Karen struggle was the longest. The Karen struggle was the most fiercest. Remember, I told you, the first people and the last people, they fought the hardest. And it's the longest as well. So what is the consequence of? Well, you can see here, all these conflicts, big conflicts, small conflicts, all over the place since 1995 in this map. So what is the consequence? The consequence is that a lot of the refugees spill over into other countries. In 2018, UNHCR counted 1.1 million Myanmar refugees. That's Karens, Kachins, Arakans, and so on, in Southeast Asia and Bangladesh. Because Bangladesh, we know that they are at the height of it, 900,000 Rohingyas had to flee there. So in that year, 86% of all refugees in that area are refugees from Myanmar. Okay. Now, there's some recent figures. UNHCR put out some figures recently. It says for refugees, at the end of 2020, 980,000 refugees. But since this coup, the 1st February, there are 22,000 more. And I think this is underestimation, because UNHCR can only put down figures where they can confirm it. But we have news from the ground, and it's more than that. In Thailand alone, there are about 20,000 went there, and in India there's 15,000. So, but we'll take it as it is. IDPs, internally displaced people, at the end of 370,000, and now 200,000. So there's an increase. This is 19 June figures. There will be more now, actually. Now, I must say that the Karens try to negotiate how to get peace. There's no doubt. There's so many times, but it's always denied. But Karens, in 2012, the Karens did sign a bilateral ceasefire agreement with the Burman government. Not only that, in 2015, they signed the nationwide, this one is the nationwide agreement, NC, along with a number of other ethnic groups. But it's called nationwide, but it's not nationwide because only 10 out of 22 ethnic armed organizations signed it. but they claim it, they claim it, they celebrated it. But because of non-unanimity, and the peace process never works until now, and we are still having problems with it. But after the NCA, the Karens expected peace talk. We stop fighting, let's talk peace. And then they would want to discuss about Panelong Agreement, the federalism issues, of course. And Aung San Suu Kyi did try to do something about this. She did try to revive the spirit of Panelong, 21st Century Panelong Conference. It did start. It didn't start too well, and then it stalled because the army sabotaged it. How do they sabotage it? They took advantage of the cessation of hostilities, and then they go into ethnic areas, not only Karens. They militarize, they put more bunkers, they put more camps, they put more equipment, they built stronger bunkers. They do land grabbing, the people planting, resource exploitation, and then they go into ceasefire areas and they violate the ceasefire. They build roads in the ceasefire areas and other human rights violations as well. They shell villages if they don't get what they want. So some of these violations included attempt to build a strategic road across Karen territories from south to north. And when the Karens objected, they start fighting and they shelling the villages as they went, and resulting in many IDPs. So this sort of skirmishes between the Burman military and Karen National Liberation Army and other ethnics too, happening even before right up to the recent coup. And here is a map of just one district, show you how militarization occurs. All those yellow stars are military camps. And as you can see, there's so many of them. And those ones with the red circle, they're the ones that are built right next door to Karen villages, which make it very dangerous to live, and you can't really move around or your daily life with safety. And sometimes they stay on the mountain top. They would fire down to the villages while they're trying to plant rice. So it's a very bad situation. And the Karens, or the Karen organizations, asked them to withdraw at least from near the villages, but they did not. So it stays as it is, which makes it very unsafe for villages. Fighting after the coup still go on, still more intensified. And one of the reasons, of course, is the Karen ethnic armed groups came out denouncing the coup, and they said they would support the protest movement, the people protesting in the cities, and if they kill the people, the army will start attacking the army. The Karens will start attacking the army. The other ethnic groups did the same. So how did the military respond? Airstrikes and ground troops. And you can see the devastation on the left there. The fighting between the military and ethnic armed groups in all states at the moment, happening at the moment. So I'm just going to go to what I see now. Casualty of the coup. This is the crisis. This is the negative part of the whole thing. And of course, so far the security forces have killed 900 protesters, detained 5,000, many of whom were tortured. They still have these violent crackdowns on the protesters. And in the meantime, COVID-19 is on a third surge. And of course, they have inadequate medical staff and medical treatment. And food shortage is very critical. Food very high, very exorbitant. And that includes my my relatives, especially in Rangoon areas. The food is very expensive, and the economy is paralyzed, of course. So that's the sort of negative aspect, the crisis aspect, of course. But the thing here is that resistance to the group, instead of stopping, instead of giving up, it keeps going. There's so many groups that protested against the coup, and they are not stopping. But they changed their tactics. They used to have big groups turning up and protest. Now they have guerrilla warfare, and some of them are armed with whatever weapon they can take. And they would, and then you see crackdowns, but they come back. That happens all the time. And these groups are different groups, and they have different philosophies, but they have a common enemy. The important thing is that the resistance keep going. And the important thing here, though, is because they're protesting together, especially this group here, Principal, the General Strike Committee of Nationalities. These are young people. They call themselves Generation Z. And they all mix up different nationalities. And the outcome of that is that they get to know each other's problem. They get to know each other's perspectives. And they're the one who's saying, you know, we must give the Rohingyas citizenship back. We must give the Karens, we must give the Chins, you know, a federal democratic union and so on. So it's a lot of convergences happening in other groups as well, of course, especially in this group here. And that is very interesting. And here, out of all the trials and tribulations, the crisis, you have different trends, positive trends coming out. And now the people who were ousted come up with a National Unity Government, NUG, and they come out and they declare themselves as the legitimate government of Myanmar. And the composition is very interesting here. It contains the ousted, the winners of the election, Aung San Suu Kyi and the party and other democratic groups. But within that composition, there are also a balance of leaders from various ethnic parties. There's a balance here. It's not just one way. And then if you look at their purpose, what they're doing, there's a confluence of pro-democracy movement and also autonomy-seeking minority communities. So what they want is not just to go to get rid of the military. No, yes, but they want to go back to democracy, but they don't want to stop there. They want to actually go on and create this federal democracy union. And there is also a provision for a federal union army, and that army will be a coalition of fighters from various ethnic organizations, be the Karens, the Kachins, from the ethnic groups. So in other words, actually the ethnic armed groups are supporting the government because their army is gone. The army is the opposition. And here they actually have declared the objectives, which I find it very encouraging. You end the violence, yes. Restore democracy, yes. But also build a federal democratic union. Had to go by steps. It take a long time, of course. At least they've come out and declare very clear objective like that. And you also notice they've actually started to write a charter there, detailing what they'll do in terms of getting to the point where they have a federal union. And they've put out what they call Federal Democracy Charter in 2021. I'll just show you a bit of it, the part 2 on guiding principles. It is very similar to what Aung San wrote in 1947 Constitution. It says member states are original owners of sovereignty, not just the Burmans. All the member states are owners of sovereignty. Remember in the 1948 Constitution, only the Burmans own the sovereignty. So, and then the member states have equal rights and rights to self-determination in full. A member state have the right to enact their own respective state. This is very important. If you don't have your own constitution, you can't make laws. You can't direct the objective of your state. So this is a very crucial thing. Aung San in his original 1947 constitution said exactly that. Each union state will have its own constitution and its organ of state, parliament, government, and judiciary. And of course, they have details about power sharing, revenue sharing, fiscal sharing, federalism. And this is the most important point here, I think. Security and defense forces shall be under the supervision and administration of democratically elected civilians. In other words, the army must be subsumed under the civilian government, like Australia, but not in Burma. So they are going to make sure that the army is subsumed under the civilian government. So that's very encouraging, good sign. And lastly, not lastly, but very important part, they had to do a lot of soul searching, a lot of discussion here, because the NLD didn't have a good policy on Rohingyas. So they announced a groundbreaking policy on the Rohingyas. They said, we will repeal Myanmar's 1982 citizenship law, because that law says, if you're not indigenous or ethnic, you're not a citizen. And they said Rohingyas are not ethnic because they came in with the British. And so they're not ethnic, so the citizenship is, they have no citizenship. But this time it says, no, we'll get rid of that, and we'll put in place citizenship law that says it's determined on the place of birth and the descent. So that's a very good, a good first start, of course, to the problem with the citizenship of Rohingyas. They'll have to decide also, of course, whether they're ethnic as well. And NUG is seeking global recognition as a legitimate government representing Myanmar. And there are some good signs here. There seems to be momentum gathering to recognize NUG. And sure, you know, the important thing is that the Coup government is not being recognized after all of 5 years, and also they are denounced by the world community, and a lot of sanctions are going there, and they are not being recognized, which is a good sign. But there is in the background a sort of a welling trend to recognize NUGs. We'll have to wait until September this year when at the General Assembly, NUG is going to try to register its credentials. So what am I saying is to say that I think that we are sort of out of the chaos. We are moving toward some directions that will lead us to the solution of our conflict in Burma. Because firstly, because they staged the coup, they dismantle the governmental system there. They dismantled their system, which was based on 2008 Constitution. So they have nothing. Constitution that they try to prevent from repealing is gone because of their action. The other thing, of course, is that 1982 citizenship is a pain in the neck, but NUG is going to repeal that, another good sign. Thirdly, this government, the composition, the policies are very balanced, especially in relation to ethnic participation, all ethnic participation. We are actually, not we, but we, of course, we are, I belong to a group that support NUG. We're trying to get the NUG government to have members from the Rohingya community. At the moment, they are no. And here, this is the one that'll get them to be recognized, because there's a seismic shift in policy toward the status of Rohingyas. And it's committed to a federal constitution. And when you look at the details of the charter, it's very much close to Aung San's. Matter of fact, it's very much close to the Australian federal system. So what I'm saying is a federal union for all citizens of Burma at last. Well, I think so. I think the signs are there. I think we have no choice, because we need to actually honor the Panlong Agreement. Otherwise, we'll never get reconciliation at all, because the ethnics won't have it. For 70 years, they are not having it. You must recognize Panlong and establish a federal democracy. On top of that, you know, we've tried for the last 70 plus years, we've tried all sorts of government, a democracy to start with from 1940 to 1962, but it's the centralized one. It is the one that had the 1948, the constitution. It centralized, the sovereignty is given to the Burmans. It doesn't work. And of course, the 50 years of military rule, they're totally against federalism. And the 2008 constitution said no
These points coming out.
no part of the union will secede, so they're not in favor of federation. But the advantage of federal system is very, very encouraging, because, you know, if you look at the world, the federal system is applied widely in the world today. There's only a couple of countries that are not a federal system. So it works. And it is applied in both large and small countries. You know, I said Burma is smaller than New South Wales. It doesn't matter, because a federal system works for small countries as well. If you look at Switzerland, and it's more stable. If you look at the history of, in the 21st century, a lot of systems underwent violent revolutions. There's only five countries that were stable, and 4 of them are federations. So that shows you, we want a stable country, a stable system, then you have to use the federal system. And this last part is the most important part. It's especially suitable for heterogeneous populations. And Burma is ethnically so diverse that unitary system has no work, will not work. So it's time that we use a system like a federation to try to solve the problem. And if you look at India, India is ethnically very diverse too. If you look at India, which is a federation, each state is a different race. You know, you have the Punjab state, and you have down south, all those different people. And if you look at Mizoram are full of Mizos. They're different people altogether, and it works. So we must honor the Panlong Agreement. We must take advantage of the advantage that it can bring having federal system. And the time seems to be right. And there has to be a convergence of ideas, of the will, and of people's willingness, you know, to cooperate. So I'd say we shouldn't miss this opportunity for our younger generations. Thank you very much, everyone. So I don't know what you want to do now. Hello, Ruth.
Hi.
How are you?
Well, I
Let
think
me
we
see
probably
you.
have some
Let
questions.
me see you first. I can't see you.
Well, I don't know quite. Oh, sorry. Start video. Yeah. No, I got
Okay.
turfed off for a little while, but I think Gary must have put me on. Thanks very much, John. That was very interesting, and it certainly reminded me of my 5 years in and out of Myanmar.
Yes.
But one of the things that I was very interested in was we were talking about the Karens and their love of education.
Yes.
And all I could think of at the time was my people taking me around Yangon to show me the buildings that had been all part of the university system there, and how the military had divided up all the faculties so that there was only one faculty at each so-called university, because that meant the university students couldn't get together. So
That's right.
I can see that, you know, all of these things are mixing in. Anyway, It was very interesting. I'm sure people will have lots of questions, and probably John will be coordinating this, I would think. So I'll just say my thanks. And
Yes. That happened. That happened with Ne Win, Ruth.
And what?
That happened with Ne Win.
Yes.
Because
it was frightening because the other thing, just not to take up more time about that, but the thing that really disturbed me was most of the places that they took me around to see, and I didn't actually go in them, I just saw them from the roadways, they were so dishevelled, the buildings were run down, long grass everywhere, hardly any people around, most of them not even operating, I suspect.
I think what Ne Win did, Ruth, was to get rid of the problem. He ordered some tank, and the tank with a cannon, and they destroyed the student union. The students were the biggest protesters. They were doing it there, we are doing it here.
Yeah.
So to get rid of the problem, there's no need negotiating, just get rid of them. So, and that's how it started, which is very sad. And all that time, the military rule spent, probably all this too, only 1% of GDP on education. And I bet when you went there, to do education, you see how backward, how ill-equipped the education system is. Yeah.
Oh, no, I don't want to get started on that. It was horrific.
Okay, what do we do next, Donald? We get to Tasneem to talk?
Or are there questions about?
Yes.
Oh, are there questions? Yes.
Yes. Would people who want to ask a question put up their hand? Gary, or would you like to unmute yourself? Kathy.
Yes, I'm unmuted. This is a
Abby.
question I might have. Yes, hi, how are you? Thank you. This is a question going right back to the beginning. I might have missed a point. The original Burmans, where did they come from? Were they there as kind of indigenous people, or?
No, they were not. They called Tibet of Burman. They came down from Tibet.
But where did they come from?
From
Okay, thank you.
the direction
I wasn't sure.
from the north.
So who was there before that? No one?
Sorry? Sorry, what did you
Were
say?
there indigenous people living in that area? Other people?
No,
were
we
there
were the first.
indigenous people living in that? But who was
According
living
to
there
his-
before you? No one.
Well, in history, we couldn't find any. So the
Uh-huh.
historian said we were the first people there.
Okay.
We were Aboriginals.
Okay, that's what I was
Yeah.
wondering. Okay, thank you. Thanks.
But
That's all.
and of course, like First Nation people, we get persecuted a bit. They treat us like servants,
So are
and,
all the So are the military all Burmans, or is it a mixture?
Well, military is Burman.
All,
Military is
okay,
Burman. Yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Can you
But
join the
also-
military if you're not Burman? Can
Sorry?
you join the
Yes.
military?
Yeah,
You can, but very, you won't be able to become a general. You might be
Yeah.
able to become a soldier or a sergeant.
Okay.
Actually,
Thank you.
one of my nephews is a sergeant there. He's in the signal corps.
Mhm. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I think David has a question there.
Several questions. What options are there for some sort of peace arrangement? It seems to be either military or diplomatic, and I can't see either of them being successful. So what options are there? Next question is, where do the various ethnic groups get their military supplies from? Yeah, and I have a third question. Yeah.
The peace option is, I'm afraid, you can't talk peace with the military, because time and time again we had ceasefire, and then they take the opportunity of cessation of hostilities. They come into our areas, and then they fortify their existing bunkers. They put more people, they put more soldiers, and when you protest, they instead of negotiating, they attack you. So that's why the only way that you can stop them is to fight them and to let them not to come in. They quite blatantly come into the terrain.
What are the chances of success by fighting them? What are the chances of success?
Well, it's very interesting. The Burma military is the second strongest, largest military in Southeast Asia, and yet for 70 years they have been trying to get rid of all these ethnic armed groups. They're still not victorious. So the important thing is, I think, because the ethnics are in all East, West, and so on, if all the ethnics get together, and this is what's happening post-coup, because at the moment the military is being attacked simultaneously by different ethnic armed groups, and so if the ethnic armed groups combine, and they do combine, they have different alliances, and if they attack them quite incessant at the same time, then we have we won't be victorious, but we can use that as a reason to negotiate. But in the past, up to the coup now, they're very clever. The military, the Burma military, would go and fight the Karens, but at the same time they have a sort of a ceasefire with the Kachins, and then they have a ceasefire with the Karen, they will go and fight the Shans and so on, sort of a divide and rule. But now the ethnics are getting the idea, and so they are actually banding together. Number one. Number two, they attack the army at the same time. So if we can do that, we won't, because they're so strong. We will not. We can't get rid of them, but we can actually. They can't fight all of us at the same time, so we can use that as a sort of bargaining chip. You can't kill us all. Let's talk peace, in a sense. And the other thing is the arms. The Wak people get arms from China, and the Arakanese get the arms from the Wak. So because the alliance, you see, and the Koreans, I think, get arms from, I'm not too sure, probably from the West.
USA mostly.
Yeah. And
Sorry, sorry.
USA mostly through the CIA.
yeah, I'm not too sure where it comes from. It doesn't come from China, but we know that the Burmese, the Burmans get the weapons from Russia. Did you read in the paper that May Online, the Coup general went to Russia to buy arms? And very interesting, when he was there, he was not greeted or received as a head of state. He was received as the head of the army. So even Russia and even China, they're not recognizing the regime, because they know that to really benefit from the relationship, they have to deal with the legitimate government, and they know that NUG is the legitimate government. So it's the, as I said, you know, they haven't recognized the NUG, the National Unity Government, yet, but they haven't recognized the coup government either. But what's interesting is the you know, when the WHO had a conference, and then both the military, both the coup government and NUG applied to come, they couldn't decide, so they didn't invite, or they didn't accept either of them. So that's another good sign as well. And so in terms of where the arms come from, that's about it. But the most the army, the ethnic army that's have the strongest, the Wa army and the Arakanese army, and they're also strategically very adept armed groups as well, and they're more attuned to modern ways, modern times, modern warfare and things like that. But I must say the Koreans are too.
Gary has shared some interesting articles in the chat if anybody wants to have a look. And the most recent article he just shared was who is selling weapons to Myanmar. So it kind of has a very interesting breakdown. And a lot of people, it seems, are making money out of that. Judith, I think you had a question. You might need to unmute yourself.
Can you unmute yourself?
There you go.
Is that working? Yeah. Is Suu Kyi a Burman? And if 85% of the country is Buddhist, and Buddhism is well known for its peaceful philosophy, it's very ironic that it's such a militaristic, racist regime in the presence of 85% Buddhist beliefs, so-called. Similarly in Sri Lanka. So that's the end of my question. Is Suu Kyi a Burman?
Yes, she is a Burman. She is a Burma.
Right.
Of course, she is the daughter of General Aung San, as you know.
Yes, of course.
General Aung San is a Burma.
Mm.
Yeah. But I believe her mother, Daw Khin Chhi, is part Karen.
Right.
Aung San's wife. Yeah.
And the Buddhism, nobody brings that up. The paradox of the peaceful religion and the militaristic regime.
The paradox.
Mm.
Yeah, it's very sad. But you know, even the Burmese generals, they are Buddhists, of course, and they you know, carried out a lot of atrocities and so on. But when they retired, they built pagodas.
To relieve their guilt.
But some of them said, you know, I know what I've done. I know my next life will not be good. So what can you do to me?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yourself.
I think
Emily?
Emily has a question.
Emily, just unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Emily.
Yes.
My question is there any intermingling between the different groups socially? Is there any to any degree intermarriage, for example, or any attempts to have multi-ethnic schools where different groups can, you know, grow up together? That's my question.
Very good question. Very good question. But because, you know, we were under the British for about 111 years, I think. But the British, as usual, carry out this divide and rule, you know. And they saw straight away that there is this traditional enmity between the Burmese and the Karens. And that's how they capitalized on it. When the British were there, we were like servants and slaves before the British came. Under the, you know, the Burmans brought in a feudal system, and we were treated as, we were discriminated, we were persecuted, and we were treated as slaves. But when the British came, they saw the traditional enmity, and they capitalized on that. But not just that, you know, the British, I must say, have a system that is rolled out to all ethnic groups, including the Burmans, actually. But we are favored because of this enmity, and the Karens got educated. They got education. The missionaries built colleges and schools, and we became, you know, from slave working hard to a nation that is very educated, and that sort of a trend carries over today. That's where we love education so much, because it got us out of our condition. And a lot of them became professionals. A lot of them became doctors, and a lot of them became politicians and so on. And the Burma army is, the majority is the Karen army. So, you know, all the top generals are Karens. A matter of fact, in the Burma army, just before the British left, the top general is called Smith Dunn, and he was the top general, and under him was Ne Win. It's a Burman, and so there is some discrimination there against the Burmans as well. But of course, when the independence came, and when with the new constitution, with the Burmans having the sovereignty, everything's changed, and the Karen officers were asked to resign. That's how it started, and the Ne Win became the top general, and a lot of the generals have to resign, and so it slowly but surely became an army full of Burmans, especially in the top echelon positions. And at one time, because the Karens were so dominant in the army, when the insurrection came in 1949, the Karens occupied the whole of the country, and it's only the Rangoon district the Burmese retained that. So, after the and actually, in the Chin state, the Chin state is very mountainous. The Chins have 53 subgroups of ethnic groups, and the British, instead of getting them together as a unit, the British rule them separately, although they're in the same area. And so today, if you ask somebody from Chin, are you a Chin? And they don't know what the meaning Chin is, because they are individual ethnic groups. Some of them are Zomi, some of them are Haga, some of them are Falam. And no, I'm not a Chin, I'm a Zomi. So that actually, sadly, is the result of divide and rule. So, you know, there's no attempt to unite us, to interact, to make us united. And the Burmese did the same thing when the Burmese took over. And if you look at the conflict, there is something called 4 cuts. The 4 cuts is meant to actually separate us. The 4 cuts mean in insurgency, you know, cut the food, cut the communication, cut the recruitment, and so on. And there's a 5th cut. The 5th cut says, cut the ties between the ethnics. So in relation to your question, all this is actually work against us in terms of coming together as a group of people. Yes, Don.
Reports that we got a few years ago was that the move by the army against the Rohingya was approved by the majority of the Burmans because they regarded the Rohingya as not a part of the ethnic composition of Burma, and they were, if you like, strangers or intruders. And it seemed that Aung San Suu Kyi had a similar opinion, and this resulted not only in the murdering of a lot of Rohingya and forcing a lot of them out of Burma, but also the remaining ones were left in what you might call concentration camp conditions. Yeah. Were those reports correct?
Yeah. The concentration camp is there, the discrimination is there, and all that's true because of the divide and rule thing. When the military took over, again, the divide and rule, they did not give true stories to the population because they control the media. And when the Rohingya crisis was on, inside the media is saying they don't call them even Rohingya. The Rohingya means men of Rohan. It means it implied ethnicity, you see. That area is called Rohan. So if you say Rohingya, I'm the man from here. So remember, for a long time, Aung San Suu Kyi didn't use that word. So it means the man of Rohan. As soon as you say that, you are admitting that they are ethnic. So it's all very politics there. But you see, the true story is that it's a border area. And, you know, a lot of those people are ethnic. And you've got to look at the history, and a lot of them claim that you've got to look at, you know, who was there, and it's a border area, and it's very hard to say. But they are saying, oh, they come in late in the 1880s as coolies and workers and so on. But the propaganda persists. Matter of fact, the majority of people in Burma have a very myopic or have very one-sided view of the Rohingyas, even the Karens. And that is because of this whole propaganda thing against the Rohingyas. And now, see, but the thing is, this is why it's so interesting with the with all the protesting in Myanmar, especially the young people from different ethnic groups get together. They start talking and they start understanding what the issue is, and they realize that the Rohingyas were not, you know, trying to take over, because there's not many of them, and they're not trying to take over at all. But the military was actually spread the news. Watch out, they're coming, you know, coming to overtake our country. There's only a handful of them, and they were never wanting to take over anything. They were persecuted, they were isolated, and they were, you know, they were ostracized, and we were driven out. But to see,
like Judith mentioned before as well, there were some very high up Buddhist monks who were encouraging the genocide. They were encouraging violence against the Rohingya. That's just my 2 cents. It's so contradictory, so confusing.
But they just add to the prejudice, you know, and they work on the people's prejudice and they amplify it. And there are a lot of monks who are very prejudiced and very reactionary as well. And there are still elements like that. And even you know, other ethnic groups, because of this divide and rule, they believe they're propaganda. But things are changing, and I'm really hopeful with this Generation Z group. They protest together, they try to talk about the issues together, and they start to realize that nothing that they've heard is correct, because they have legitimate, these people, all people have legitimate reasons to protest. So so they now on their Facebooks, they start to apologize for the treatment of Rohingyas. Yeah. And they start to apologize to the Karens for the mistreatment. And now they come to the view that unless, you know, we have this federation of all ethnic groups, including the Burmans, we will never get peace in this country. So it's the young people who are actually spearheading this movement. And they say that we can't have this because our generation will be lost altogether. We must stop this now.
Can we have one final question for John, and then we can go on to, I think, David and Diana, if that can be, unmute yourself, and then we can go on to Tasneem's talk.
Yes.
I guess in a way you've just, John, you've just answered my question, because when you were talking about developing a constitution and all the rules and regulations about working in unity, if I'm holding a Russian gun and you're holding a Chinese gun, one of us will die. So how can you talk peace when everybody's carrying guns and everybody opposes what the other person is doing? I think your answer, to some extent, it's the next generation that has to change that. Because I can't see how one talks peace with an army, full stop.
Yeah. We've done that many times, and it ends up, we end up losing our territory. We end up losing our land. We end up losing our mineral resources. We end up being, you know, inhumanly treated when we talk peace with them and when we sign. So that's why you see we have no choice with this coup to get rid of the military, not to kill all of them, but to get them into a situation whereby they have to go back to the barracks. This is what we're aiming to do. Get rid of the military, go back to democracy, and then the next step is build the federal democracy union. It's a big ask. It's a long time.
Thank you, John. Sorry, David, Diane, can you hold your question till the end, and we'll let Tasneem give a talk now about a bit more a bit less sad news and a bit more positive about some of the interactions. So a different tangent.
I'll try. This is kind of more of a good news story and an achievable goal as well. So thanks very much, Gary. Thanks everyone for having me and having us as well. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, which I'm standing on and we're all standing on, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Donald asked what I do, and I do work as an MC for celebrations for the Korean community. I've also helped apply for the Friendship Grant, DFAT's Friendship Grant, and I'm also the secretary for the Friends of TCI, which is a small non-profit that helps out a higher learning facility in a very remote region in Myanmar. Let me share my screen. So the Korean community in Australia, as Dad has been saying, has had a great success in community building here and integrating into the wider Australian community. And obviously the Sydney community is one example. Neil and Dad also mentioned Bendigo are also really good examples of successful regional settlements. And even though this refugee journey for them has been very challenging, they have a very good history of giving back to the Korean community in Myanmar and on the Thai-Burma border as well. And so it's one of those projects that I wanted to share with you today, and that's supporting the Dr. T. Thumbia Christian Institute. And as Dad has previously said, the Korean community places a very high holds education very high. So understanding that education is one of the key factors in development and social and economic success. In mid-2014, a group of education experts met in Thailand and they discussed the needs of the Korean people. And I'll just show you, if you guys don't mind, it's just a short clip about the inception of TCI.
Do senior Olowelo could auto Dr. Thumbia, Kripo Piasomonilo. Dalo to call me wepe, Udata, Mutro Gore, Gotulenilo. Udata Dalowe, Weda pe, Holoclo Gurney, do Holoclo, a muto to call me way, Gojote, Thailandilo.
None of it sounded except only bit of the sound was phonetic.
So, whoops, I'm going to play it again. Don't want to play it. So as you can see, the campus is right in the middle of the jungle. It's quite remote. So these experts decided unanimously to establish the Dr. T. Thumbia Christian Institute, and it was established in 2015. It's accessible only by boat. And so you might be wondering who Dr. T. Thumbia is, and he's this handsome gentleman in the middle there. He was a Korean leader, and he was a Korean educator as well, and he earned his Doctor of Divinity degree in the United States. And so the Institute is named in his honor and for his dedication to the development of the Korean people. So a number of Friends of TCI executive committee have visited TCI. You can see Dad in the middle there. That's me, Mum and Dad, and on the left there, it's the Salween River, and this is the course that you take down to TCI. Our chairperson, Peter Tu, also visited. He composed the TCI anthem. And Mum and Dad also attended graduations, I think in 2018 and 2019. Yeah. So TCI is the only institute that provides professional and leadership training to refugee and internally displaced Karen youth in this area. And although it is based on Christian values, they accept students from all religions. So in this area, you've got Christian, obviously Buddhist, and also animist, which is that, as Dad explained, traditional religion of respecting spirits in nature. They offer 3 degrees, so English, Information Technology, and Business Administration. And bearing in mind, this is all happening right now. They've just started their new semester, even though there's been bombing and airstrikes in this area. So this is a good news story, guys. I'm going to give you a clip of one of the students. His name is So Jotwe, and he's going to talk about his goals in attending TCI. So earlier this year, TCI celebrated its 4th graduation. So it's graduated 70 students to date. Unfortunately, we couldn't go this year or last year because of COVID. The majority of the graduates are employed in Karen State and other parts of Myanmar, and others have gone on to study in Thailand and the US. So just a little bit more about Friends of TCI Australia. So normally in the Karen community, fundraising is done in a more, I guess, casual manner. It's done informally, like through church and community groups, and then the money is sent through personal contacts. But the Sydney Karen community decided that they would like a more formalised approach to fundraising and sending the money. And so Friends of TCI Australia was established as a non-profit in 2017. And we started accepting donations in 2018. And this year, soon, not quite yet, we're just under, we're going to have contributed $30,000 to TCI. And that's largely because of the actions of the Sydney Karen community and like-minded Australians through events like our Sports Day. And so we had friendly matches between Wollongong and Sydney, and there was fundraising with lots of food. And I think on that day alone, we raised $5,000 just from the community. And I just wanted to highlight what a massive achievement that is, because it's just one of the many projects that the community does fund. They recently held fundraising for internally displaced people who are fleeing from the military, and they managed to raise a lot of money. The immediate concerns for TCI are updated laptops. Friends of TCI managed to donate a number of laptops a couple of years ago, and they've become outdated. So that's their latest concern. We've just donated money for 20 new tables and a printer. Because they've got so many first-year students, they didn't have enough tables, and they needed to take tables out of the library just to seat people. So that was the most recent donation, and their other concerns are internet and staff allowances at the moment. If you want to check us out, we are online, so you can visit us at friendsofTCIaustralia.org. We do have facilities if you are interested donating online. You can donate once off or a recurring donation. But one of the easiest ways that you can support, if you or your family are on social media, and I know you guys are, if you are on Facebook or on Instagram, if you wanted to follow Friends of TCI Australia and just share our posts, share any information when we're fundraising or trying to draw attention to the projects that we're doing. We have an October fundraiser and a wine raffle in December. That would be just the most valuable thing that you could possibly do. But yeah, this was just like a good news kind of thing to let you know that despite what's happening in Burma at the moment, the communities are still resilient and they're still dedicated to the education of their people as well. So thank you. I'm going to stop sharing now.
Thank you, Tasneem. Any questions for Tasneem or John to continue? Just unmute yourself.
I think Helen had a question there. You might need to unmute yourself, Helen. There you go. Oh, I still can't hear you. I'm so sorry, Helen.
Maybe you're...
Oh, she might be writing. I think she's writing it in the chat then, maybe.
Okay. Elaine and James, you had a question before? Or was it David and Diana? Not sure.
David, I think, had a question for that.
You want to unmute yourself, David?
I have a couple of questions, but before I do, I noticed in the photographs, one of our close friends, Ernie Friedlander, was in the photos.
Yes, he was. Yes. Oh, is he? Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, he was there it was a planning meeting, and we spent a long time talking about strategy and this kind of thing. Does he come to this meeting as well?
No, not this meeting, but he's part of an organisation that many of us are also part of.
Oh, super. That's so lovely.
So
yeah.
is Gary involved with STARTS?
Yes, I am. We're using the STARTS Zoom account tonight, but I'm also involved in an organisation that Ernie runs, and moving forward together. And Friends of TCI Australia heavily supported that in the beginning, and Ernie came along to our founding meeting and our planning meetings, and is supporting behind the scenes of Friends of TCI Australia when he can. Yeah.
So can I get to my question now? My question relates to international aspects. One, I noticed that all the refugee camps, or most of the refugee camps, are on the Thai border. So what's the relationship between the Thai government, the military coalition, and the National Unity government? And also, by a similar token, the Thai people with those. And as another aspect of the international thing, various embassies and consulates of Burma around the world, who do they report to?
Well, the ambassador here reports to the military, is that correct?
Different countries report to different people. Most ambassadors will report to the national government that's recognised at the time. In terms of the Thai government and the junta in Burma, that changes. You've got to remember that the Thais were never colonised, and they like to have a buffer states between themselves and the Burman. So they've supported the Karen in the past, and they've not supported them at different points in time. It depends on their politics at the time. Is that an answer of your question or not really?
Dad,
did you have a comment about the relationship between the Thai government and
it changes. It changes. At the moment, it changes because before the coup and in the up to 2015 or something, the relationship between the two governments, the Myanmar government, let's face it, they are both military governments, so they are very friendly. But the present Prime Minister is especially friendly with Myan Line, the Burmese coup leader. Matter of fact, there was an election in Thailand, and Mail Online was waiting for the result of the election. He said that if the present prime minister didn't get the job, he wouldn't stage the coup. So they work very closely together. So the policy has changed in terms of refugees. Earlier, the policy is, yes, come in. We won't treat you as refugees. We treat you as there's a word, people running from the temporary something. So yes, we'll give you accommodation. We'll give you facilities. That's how all the refugee camps on Thai border was built. They're not refugee camps to the Thai people. We just give you a temporary shelter, but they still help and they still provide as much as they can. But at the moment, after the coup, there were a lot of refugees from the Karen state spilling into Thailand. But there was an agreement between the Thai government and the Burmese government not to let them in. So that's why, the refugee number on the UNHCR report, it's only 22,000, but there are a lot of displaced people wanted to, spilling over, but the Thai military actually pushed them back. So the relationship now is so close that the refugees are finding it hard to find any safe harbor in Thailand. A lot of them went there, and when they were pushed back, they tried to stay in the jungle because some of them can't go back to current state because they are fighting. They are ground fighting. They are also airstrikes as well. So that's the relationship in terms of refugee. At the moment, there is no good going to Thailand if you want a refugee status, because the Thai government is working with the Burmese government to drive back any refugees coming from, especially those refugees who come from the protester, the protester. For instance, people in the CDM movement, the civil disobedience movement, a lot of them had to flee. And they flee into current state, and there are three categories of it. Some of them want to stay in current state. Some of them want to be trained to go back to fight the military. Some of them want to go into Thailand, and these people are in trouble when they go into Thailand because, from the point of view of the military government, they are criminals, and they get arrested. They get sent back to Burma. So this is what's happening at the moment. Who reports to who? It's a bit hard because the permanent head of ambassador to the UN, Somo Tun, he spoke out against the military coup, and he does not report to the military coup. He report to NUG, because he is ambassador for NUG, because he said NUG is the legal government, the National Unity Government. But other ambassadors are reporting back to the coup leaders.
Just quickly, Dad, I know that Helen had a question. It was related to the language, the Karen language, and she asked, "Is it how different? Is it different from Burmese, and how different is it?"
Can I share something with you then? Let me share this. Where is it? Can you don't see that, do you? Let me just share.
No. But the script is the same script.
Share. I'm not able to share, I'm afraid.
You should be able to. There you go.
What am I looking for? Oh, here. Can you see the screen?
Yeah.
So, you see, when the missionary comes, the Korean did not have a script, or they have a script, but it's not and although they had a script, but the missionaries actually use the Burmese alphabet to develop the script for the Korean language. A lot of the basic letters are Burmese alphabet. There's a ga, there's a la, there's a a, this is ga, this is na. But there are little inflection over there to make the sound for the Korean language. So for example, good morning is Hola age. And if you say, are you well? Na osua. If you say I'm well and you, ya osu na mo. Na mo means how are you? And here is have you eaten? This is you find it strange because in Australia you'll never greet somebody like have you eaten, but they do that. Na o me we are. Na o me we li are. In other words, if you happen to say, no, I haven't eaten yet, they say, come in and I'll cook you some. That's sort of hospitality thing. So the language is Sino-Tibetan, I think. And the Burmese language is quite similar too. So in Burmese, if you want to say, how are you? Ni kaung ya la. But in Korean is na usua.
Oh, yes.
I don't know whether it's answer your. I'm not a linguist, I'm afraid. But I know the Korean language is Sino-Tibetan.
And there's also a couple of different languages within Korean as well that are completely different from each other.
Yeah. But I think you might be. I think they're both Sino-Tibetan. It's like Chinese. They're both tonal languages. Yeah. So in Burmese, if I say le, that's win. If I say lay, that's for. So the tone makes a difference in terms of the meaning. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Maybe not.
That's great. No, she says that's great. That was great, Dad.
Okay. Thank you. I'll share this now.
Can I just say that time is getting on, and if there's anybody got one last question, can they ask now? Otherwise, we'll have to finish this part of the evening and subsequently briefly discuss our next meeting. So has anybody got a question that they would like to ask before? Ruth, can you speak? Unmute yourself.
Oh, I've got lots of questions, but I think they're all too educational. And I think this has been really fascinating to find out really about what happens on the ground, because we're so remote from the reality of how this is working. Yeah. And I thought it was very interesting to know about how these young people are getting together and really changing the dynamic of how a country might operate. The only thing, of course, I'm very concerned that these young people probably won't have weapons that the military have, and that's very sad. I guess one of the things that came up for me is that I had to deal quite a lot with the head monks of Burma, and as who was it? Not Emily.
I think it was maybe Judith.
It was that Judith spoke about. I was thinking, I wondered, whether they had a role in all of this, because they were incredibly helpful for education, but clearly they probably don't have the military power. Anyway, I don't know quite what Don was asking me to do, but if he's asking me to thank you and Tasneem about coming along, I'm very happy to do that. because I think it's been most fascinating. And it's given us an insight into really an area that most of us have only seen as a tourist. And that's a completely different way of looking at how a country operates and its peoples, especially the enormous diversity that's available in Myanmar. So thank you both for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, and for coming along on a Saturday night. When apart from being in lockdown, you might have had really very exciting things to be doing. So thanks very much.
Party.
Indeed.
Missed out on a massive party, Ruth. It was really tough.
I'd like to say a big thank you to everybody.
Yeah.
It's really a pleasure being here, and sharing knowledge is always good. And as I said, we also not only giving information, we also appreciate your feedback as well. And there's so much interest, and with all the questions. So it's been a very lovely evening for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you.
Can I just say